Previously on Sailing Good Old Boats, Project Vikita.
So folks, today shakedown sail. Guess what happened? Where did we go? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Why? Why did we go anywhere?
Engine problems.
As always. So pump are empty. So just going through this for the very first time, there you can see that black stuff. That's the deposit that will end up in the filters. Alright, tank is clean. It looks really well. Really good. I think that mission has been accomplished. After I've cleaned out the fuel tank, I want to install this pre-filter with a water separator. So got that fuel supply line going over to the filter, pre-filter, and then going from here down to the engine to the pump. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of gunk in there. I have to clean that out. I use some brake cleaner. There she comes. I want the bubbles to go away. Still no start. Hello guys, I'm back at the boat after my last endeavors of changing the fuel filters. So I put in, as you have seen, a Delphi water separator filter between tank and engine pump, and then I changed also the actual engine filter. The pre-filter that was on before was pretty gunked up with old diesel sludge in there and everything, so it didn't look too good. And yeah, after I had changed this all out, I gave it a try, and guess what? No start. So I'm super frustrated by now. And yeah, so I thought about what could it be. So next I came up with was, after I bled, by the way, all the fuel lines also, so that was fine and taken care of. There's this little hand pump device on the fuel feeding pump that you can use to prime the lines, and I did that until there was not one bubble coming out anymore. It was all clear diesel. And to be extra safe, I put the line directly at the injector, and then I started cranking the engine to make a turn. And normally you would expect, as every revolution, you know, as the engine turns and the feeding pump and injector pump is activated, that there would be a healthy squirt coming out of there, because it has to have enough pressure to open the injector nozzle so that it would spray fine diesel mist into the combustion chamber. Well, that didn't happen. There was only a very sad little trickle every now and then. I'm assuming that I have a problem with the feed pump. I hope it's not the injector pump or the injector. When I pulled the filters, the actual fuel filter itself on the engine looked pretty clean, and I changed that last year. There was a little bit of sludge in the ball, but not much, and the filter itself looked clean. So what I'm assuming is, hopefully I'm right, that the pump, either the diaphragm of the feeding pump failed, or there's a little strainer in there. The strainer clogged up, because after the pre-filter with a water separator, there's no other filter. So basically the way it goes is tank to the external pre-filter and water separator. From there it goes to the feeding pump. From there it goes to the actual engine fuel filter, and from there it goes to the injector pump and to the injector. And I really hope I have nothing in the injector pump or in the injector. I hope that's all clean and in good shape. So what I will try next, and that is going to be a real tricky operation, is I will remove the fuel feeding pump. And that sits in such an unlucky angle, the way the engine is put into the boat and the way everything is installed on the engine, that I cannot get to it. It is on the, if I look down, basically have an opening to work on the engine in the cockpit. You can take the floor off and look down on top of the engine, and you can see kind of the rear end of it, where you have the gear case and everything, and the filter. And then I can work from the front when I take here the steps off. Ouch. So I can work from two sides, but on neither side can I reach the board. So the way the engine is, or the pump on the engine is built up, I show you that I've ordered a replacement for about 80 bucks from a store in Holland. And the gentleman assured me that this was for the MD1 Bravo that I have, because it said MD1, MD2, MD3, so forth and so on. And then in a little disclaimer down there it said also for the Bravo, MD1B, MD2B and so on. So as you probably know, the MD1, Volvo Penta MD1 has 7 horsepower, and then the MD1B that I have has 10 horsepower. Don't ask me how they came up with another 3 horsepower out of this engine, but he said it's the same pump, so hopefully he's right. So that's a replacement. It looks slightly different, but that is apparently the beast. So this here is driven by the camshaft of the engine. It's a membrane pump, and this will be driven by the camshaft. And this here is that little hand primer pump that I was talking about, that you can use when you vent the lines to hand prime the pump. I believe this is in from the tank or from the water separator tank side, and this is out to the actual engine fuel filter side and injector pump. And somewhere in here is a little strainer and a membrane. So I would assume, and I hope I'm right, that either the strainer is clogged or the membrane is not 100% tight anymore. You know, combination of both. That I have a massive pressure loss here because of the pump. The pump is bolted on with 2 bolts to the casing, and then I have to connect those 2 banjo fittings here for the fuel line in and out. And there's a replacement by Volvo, and there's a bulletin out that tells you that the outline going to the fuel filter and to the injector pump has a replacement. You cannot use the actual line that's on the engine. It's not fitting for whatever reason. I hope that's not the case with this one here. So we'll go as we learn as we go, basically. And fingers crossed, if I get this done somehow, that we'll have an engine again. Because we really want to go out and get out of here and go sailing. And in order to do that, I need an engine to maneuver here in the harbor, to get this 3.3 metric tons of pure recreational sailing power back out on the water. So let's hope that this will do the trick. Oh yeah, by the way, also forgot to mention, O-ring gasket here, very important detail, is on also, and I put it in already, that I definitely not forget about it, because I would be that kind of guy who actually manages to screw it up so badly. So the O-ring is in, I'll make sure it stays in. Alright, let's get to it. So to make sure that there's not too much revving out, I will use a thick plastic bag. That's a really thick PVC material here. And that worked well when I changed the filters, because you can really get this around the area that you work, and everything will technically drop into this bag, hopefully, if things go alright, because I don't want to have any diesel going down into the bilge and then being pumped overboard. Obviously that's not good for the environment, and I'm trying to avoid this as good as I can. So I use this, and then I will use some soaker pads, and hopefully this is going to do the trick. Alright you guys, so you can see how tight that actually is. I have this beautiful little mirror here, and the pump sits right here. Grabs the mirror here. You see one of the bolts there. Now if I get it around the corner, you can see the other bolt. These two bolts are basically where the pump is attached to the engine casing. Here and here. So I have to work around in an angle to get to it. And then there's one fuel line that you can see from right here. Let's see this guy here. It needs to come off, and then there's one on the other side that I hopefully get from the engine room. From the cockpit opening on this side. Somewhere in here. I hope I can position the cameras in an angle that you see actually more than I do. One more thing I've forgotten to mention is I'm not quite sure, but the feed pump as well as the injector pump, as far as I understand that correctly, is driven by the camshaft. So I want to make sure that I'm not moving the engine, not turning anything while I'm having this taken out. I don't know if it's that critical. I assume for the injector pump it is, because there's a timing. I'm not sure about the feeding pump, but just to be rather safe than sorry, I made sure that I have a mark here. So I will have this up and I leave it like this while I'm pulling the pump out and puts a new one in, to make sure that everything stays exactly the same while I'm doing this. So I just dry fitted the Allen key, and I can get it only in like so, and then I think I'll use a wrench to get a good handle on it and loosen it up from here. And I use a wrench to get that fuel line off. So that would be step number 1. I managed to get a 19 on it. So here goes nothing. It starts dripping. Now, I have to be very careful that I don't lose a gasket. Well, that was number 1. So I just got the bolt from the banjo out to the fuel pump, to the injector pump, excuse me. This will go to the filter and injector, and it's super tight to work there, so my apologies if I couldn't get good footage here. Oh man, I really hope I don't lose that bolt. Because what disappears in the bilge stays in the bilge. Hope if I drop it by accident, that will hopefully will end up somewhere in the back. Because I can't see really all that much here. I expected it to be pretty bad. But this is worse than I thought, to be honest. It's really hard to get to it. Just because in this boat the engine is in such a snug fit here. It's ridiculous. It's completely loose, but I can't get it out. Well, here it comes. Okay, lucky. So I hope you can see that I have the pump now off, and she goes in there, and now I think the seal is still on, if I see it correctly, so I pull that off, but I believe I have lost one gasket or banjo fitting, so I have to see if that's down in the back somewhere. So hope for the best. So I got the old pump out, there she is. And I'm afraid I might have, oh no, there's the seal I was looking for. Lucky, it's still on here, so I can get that from the Bennu fittings for the in and out line. Yeah, and the seal for the pump itself is still on the casing, so I have to get that off. So there's the old seal. And now everything is ready to be installed with the new seal and the new pump. Okay, got both the bolts back in, as you can see. I hope I placed the seal right and everything. So here's the Bennu fitting that goes out, as the next one will address. And then we'll get the in fitting going. And everything with mirror and around 5,000 corners. So, man, I haven't had that much fun in a long time. Alright you guys, so I got it all done, full of diesel. I hope I caught most of it. Now it's showtime. I'll fire her up and see if she comes. It might be a little bit of a process. I vented the line, that's the filter. Seems to be alright. So it's showtime. Dinner time. Gotta eat something. It's been a rather frustrating day, guys, seriously. Still no engine start after all of that. Man. Alright you guys, so still no start. So I've cleaned the tank, replaced the pre-filter with water separator and the line. Then I have replaced the feed pump. Next is the high pressure pump, the injection pump, and after that the injector. Because the injection pump or high pressure pump is expensive and difficult to work with, because it has to be fine adjusted, and there's a timing on that. It's also driven by the camshaft. I don't want to touch that at this point. So next we will try to pull the injector. When I had the engine apart and I looked at the piston, I noticed that one part of the piston had a lot of burn marks and craters, and it looked almost like the surface of the moon, like I said, in this one area. So it tells me that there might be an uneven spray pattern, or might have been an uneven spray pattern in the combustion chamber. Most likely related to a faulty injector. And I cleaned it as good as I could when I had the engine head off. And I think I might have done it for a while, that it would start spraying again, but certainly not perfectly fine and even, because when the engine was running it smelled like unburned diesel or oil. It wasn't a clean burn. That tells me that we might have an injector issue. It's probably just peeing into the combustion chamber and flooding it instead of spraying an even mist. So that's what's going to happen today. We try to get that boy out somehow with a slide hammer. You know, we'll use a hook or something to attach it to the injector itself. It has a little sleeve where it can get under, I hope, and then hammer it out of there. I've sprayed it with some special stuff to loosen up injectors, for diesel injectors, so this will soften up that gunk a little bit, and maybe it will even come out by compression alone. That's the first thing that I'm going to try, to spray it with this and then crank the engine up till it pops out. We'll see. But first, coffee. I really hope that this will get into the injector. They say let it sit for 15 to 30 minutes. So I've been doing this yesterday night, this morning, and now again. I really try to give it lots of it, and hopefully again a lot helps a lot and it will come out. Here I've screwed one nut against the other to have enough force to take the actual bolt out. It gives me a little bit more leverage here to work on the actual injector. So I have both lines off. This is a Banyu fitting. I think this might be the backflow line and this is the high pressure line, or vice versa, I'm not quite sure. But there was good pressure on that, so now I'm trying to get the actual injector out. So with a little bit back and forth and chemical debonding, I got it to a point where I can move it now. So we'll work it and let it seep in a little bit longer, and then hopefully with a slide hammer we can pump it up to the upside to get that injector out. Now it's time to bring the big guns out. That should do it. Thinking maybe a hook like this, or let's start out with that guy here. I'm thinking something like that. Should do it. So here she is. Got her out. So now I need to get her into a vise to unscrew the lower part, because the actual injector itself is sitting in here and this unscrews basically from the main part. So I have to get this off in order to get the new one in. Okay, so that's the copper sleeve where the injector sits in, and the high pressure line and the return line.
The project unscrew the injector and swap the injector tip was tackled by my dad. It basically comes apart exactly like a pan. So this is the actual injector tip. It has a plunger in the middle and you have to make sure that you get the orientation right. First you want to make sure that everything fits properly, so just get it hand tight. Now tighten it further with a tool. This wrench here seems to do the trick. Now you want to get this relatively tight because the injector has to seal properly. In order to achieve this, you can see my dad is using a pipe extension here to have some proper leverage, but be careful that you don't overdo it. You can also break the threads. I did not find any torque values for this.
So guys, that's how the injector looks like as an entire unit. So we have here the high pressure in and out, the return line, and then this here is the injector tip. And also important that you compare the numbers. So that's the entire unit and that is how it will go back in. And we put rubber gloves over the in and out line to make sure that there's no contamination and no dirt getting into it. So that's something like a copper paste or comparable to that, and you want to just put it around the injector to make it easier next time to get it out again. And it makes it slide in easier also. Here it goes. So that's the way it goes in. So now I pull here the little glove off to make sure that I see the orientation correctly, and then we'll just basically with a little bit of wiggle and twist and turn. So guys, now the new injector is in, and what can I tell you, still no start. However, my dad, old diesel mechanic and knows a thing or two because he's seen a thing or two, said, you know what, I don't think we have a fuel issue. Because he said, like, look, there's unburned diesel coming out at the end where we don't want to see that, and said, like, you know what, I think we have a compression issue. Let's check the oil pan. I was like, okay. Said, what about, imagine it blows by either the piston rings, even though they have been done and brand new, and the cylinder has been honed, and There's a new head gasket in, but simply the engine has 3,250 hours plus on, and you know, maybe it's just worn to a point where it's pumping a little bit down into the oil pan. Sure enough, I put the stick. First thing that I found is it looked grayish and relatively thin, which is an indication for diesel going down into the oil pan. And when the engine slowly died, it smelled like, you know, it didn't smell very good, like oil, like burned oil. So now the oil is extremely thinned out with diesel, so that is not helping with a good compression. But yeah, it's thinned out. So next thing that I will do is an oil change to have proper oil down in the pan again. And I assume there might have been a combination out of a faulty injector that is actually, let's say, peeing diesel into the combustion chamber instead of creating a clean spray pattern, that you have a mist in there that can actually be combusted. And therefore there's basically always a puddle of diesel sitting in there, and that is making its way down into the oil pan and not helping with lubrication, obviously. So I think that is kind of what's going on here. So next I'll do an oil change, and then we'll see if she fires back up, if that actually helps the issue to get some compression back. And if not, we'll probably call it the end of the journey here, because at some point we want to go sailing, and it's really a bummer. We would not have rebuilt this boat to this extent if we would have known that the engine is actually worn beyond use. And I'm saying that from a perspective, having that in the boat now in very limited time to get it ready. What we should have done in the beginning is getting the engine out of the boat, doing a complete proper overhaul, and then putting it back in, or putting a replacement engine in, or something like that. Or what I wanted to do in the very beginning, actually converting this boat into an electric sailboat, which I really like, because this diesel engine, the Volvo MD1B, is a phenomenal engine. It's beautiful, but in this boat here, it is a very snug fit, and it makes it extremely difficult to work around the engine in the boat, or to reach the seacocks that are placed in the engine compartment. I actually have to undo the 4 screws of the floor pan in the cockpit all the time to get to it, and I think that is kind of a disaster. That is not safe. If something fails back there and I have to close one of the seacocks, it will take me a while to get to it, and that's not very good. So in my opinion, and all the Bianca fans out there, please forgive me saying this, I think the Volvo MD1B is a very massive chunk of metal sitting in this tiny boat, and it makes it very difficult to work around this. For instance, my fuel separator, water separator fuel filter that comes right after the tank is sitting on the forward bulkhead here. It's a cockpit under the port side locker, so you cannot check water separation or anything like that unless you unscrew that and actually look down there. So anyhow, I'm rambling and carried away here. Important is, so next step is oil change, so we have proper lubrication again, and then hopefully with a new injector and a clean spray pattern, we'll get some of that compression back and have a clean combustion and get a couple more hours out of this engine. And if not, I guess I'll build a sculling oar or something. I have to come up with a plan B. Yeah, that's where we're at. So that's sailing good old boats. So time for an oil change. Like I said, the engine oil is extremely thinned out. So I will change the filter down there and get the dipstick out and show you real quick what I found. So it's extremely diluted with, I assume, diesel. So the level actually rose, so something is making its way down in the oil pan, and as you can see, this here is very thin and doesn't look anything like thick diesel oil. So that's something else. The way it smells, I would say, I don't know, I'm not quite sure, but I hope this is not water, this is actually diesel making its way down into the oil pan. And I'm getting my old trusty pump out, Normally you want to warm the engine up to warm up the oil, that it will be thinner and easier to suck it out of the pan. But because it's so diluted, I won't do that and see if I can suck it out just the way it is. It comes, and as you can tell, there's already diesel ahead of the oil. Oh, another liquid. Let's just say another liquid, whatever that might be. But it's not just oil coming out of there. Yeah, again, I got that tip from my dad when he said, like, you know what, take out the oil level stick that you use to measure the oil level in the pan, and then put your finger on the hole and start cranking. And when I did that, it puffed through the hole of the dipstick. So I took the dipstick out, and all of a sudden, you know, when I was holding my finger on top of the hole, it went like pff, pff, pff. So there's massive blow by. There's definitely a lot from the combustion chamber going straight down into the oil pan. That's not good. That's not how it should be. I bought those bed towels here, those soaker pads. I put that under the oil filter, so that hopefully when I unscrew it, most of that stuff will actually end up in that towel. So that's all I could get out of there. That's it. Very strange. I'm using my belt to loosen up the filter. New oil just to get a good seal around here, and then you just want to have that hand tight. Yeah, alright you guys, so didn't oil change, didn't change anything. Also noticed there's more and more oil accumulating in the bilge the more I crank the engine, so we have here a major issue. Yeah, I think that's it. Total engine failure. I don't know what happened, if she blew a gasket or if the pitted area in the piston finally got pitted through, but that's the end of the story. Alright you guys, so the engine is done. You want to be the cameraman? Okay, then you be the cameraman, that we can tell the peeps what's going on. You want to say what's going on?
No.
Okay. No. So, yeah, the engine is finito. We will not tinker anymore with
Dead.
it. Dead, like... like what? Like... Yeah, so it's done. I mean, it would be probably fixable if somebody would lift the machine or the engine out of the boat and actually really start rebuilding it properly, entirely. But we don't have time for that, so we have to come up with a very efficient and quick plan B. And that will be continued in a different episode then. And because we need some time for that and we want to actually go sailing, we will take a production cut. Time and playtime, nobody's really watching YouTube videos right now. You guys are out playing, everybody's out playing. So, you know, we'll take a production break of about, what do you think, 4 weeks or something?
I think 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. So we'll be back. Stay tuned, guys. Don't forget us. We come up with a plan B and we'll see that we get this boat out of the slip, one or the other way. Thanks for watching.